What if a simple wrong turn could lead you into a story you'd be terrified to tell? This happened to me a decade ago. I decided to relocate from Phoenix all the way to Spokane, Washington. I was in my mid-20s, just me and my elderly Labrador stuffed into a cramped 16-foot rental truck with my entire life packed in the back. This was before reliable GPS. I had a basic cell phone and a stack of printed online maps on the seat beside me. It wasn't the smartest setup for navigating endless, empty deserts where service would vanish for hours. But I was determined and maybe a little naive. Somewhere in the vastness of West Texas, I realized I'd made a critical error. My fuel needle was hovering on E, and I hadn't seen an exit for a town or a gas station in what felt like forever. Just as real fear began to set in, a tiny settlement materialized on the horizon like a ghost town. I was so focused on reaching the pumps I didn't even catch its name. It was a blink-and-you'll-miss-it kind of place, a handful of streets eerily quiet. I filled the tank, never went inside, and expected to be back on the road in minutes. Except I couldn't find the way out. I don't mean I took a wrong turn. I circled that entire town 3 times. I could see the interstate from certain points, but every road I took either curved back on itself or just stopped. Frustrated and anxious, I finally went into the gas station to ask for help. And that's where I met the clerk. He was a thin man with stringy hair partly covering his face, barely glancing up from a newspaper. He wasn't overtly threatening, but his energy was just wrong. He spoke in a monotone, giving me directions that made no logical sense. He told me to take a specific route that would add nearly 20 miles to my trip. I paused. 20 miles? I didn't drive that far to get here. He just shrugged, mumbling about the road winding, still avoiding eye contact. I left the store with my instincts screaming. My hands trembled so badly I fumbled with the keys. And once inside the truck, I just broke down. There was no single action that was a clear threat, but every fiber of my being told me something was deeply wrong. I didn't know what he wanted, the contents of my truck or something worse, and I had no intention of finding out. The problem was, he was the only person I'd seen. Then, a beat-up blue pickup pulled in. The vehicle looked like it had survived a war, but the man who stepped out was the picture of a classic rancher. Worn jeans, sturdy boots, a kind face. I didn't think twice. I rushed over and asked if he knew how to get back to the highway. Maybe he saw the panic in my eyes, because he immediately smiled warmly and said he could help. He explained there was a hidden turnoff just past a small drainage culvert, a spot I'd passed multiple times without seeing. He said it confused travelers all the time. Then I asked, "How far is it to the interstate from here?" He laughed softly. "Oh, about half a mile. You can practically see it from the edge of town." My blood ran cold. I told him about the clerk's directions. His expression shifted instantly. He stared at me and asked, quietly, how I'd even heard of that road. I told him the clerk suggested it. He was silent for a beat, then asked if I had a detailed map. My printouts were useless here. He went to his truck, pulled out a worn, folded map, and spread it on his hood. He traced the route I'd been given, and it led miles into barren desert, ending at a cluster of abandoned trailers and rusted machinery. He told me that road went nowhere, and the clerk, he said, lived out there. I learned that day that fear isn't a weakness. It's an alarm. I'll never forget the way that rancher looked at me when he said I'd been smart to listen to my gut. I don't know what that clerk's plan was, but I know it wasn't good. I was a young woman, alone, with no signal. It chills me to think how that day could have ended. But I got lucky. I met a kind stranger with a dusty truck who helped me find my way. I never got his name. This was years ago when I was maybe 19. A good friend asked me to join his family on a road trip that culminated in a show just over the state line. The plan was simple. Drive by day, then park at campgrounds at night and sleep in their RV. It was supposed to be relaxed and fun. Our first night, we hadn't even left the state when we found a pleasant campsite right by a lakeshore. It had a real family-friendly atmosphere. RVs neatly arranged, the sounds of kids playing earlier, nothing seemed off. So we all relaxed, maybe too much. After everyone had settled into sleep, I stepped outside for some fresh air. I've always loved the water, and since the RV was parked so close, A short stroll seemed harmless. As I walked toward the lake, I passed an old, weathered boathouse. I noted it as a landmark for my return. I took off my sandals and stood where the water lapped at my ankles, just losing myself in the moonlight. Further down the shore, I noticed a man standing still. It was a public area, so I thought nothing of it, just another person enjoying the night. When I decided to head back, that's when the feeling started. That man was gone. But as I neared the boathouse, I was sure I saw someone duck behind it, like they didn't want to be seen. My mind went into high gear. I didn't want to overreact, but I wasn't going to be careless either. I quickly called a friend who was a night owl and started talking loudly, saying things like, "Yeah, I see the RV. I'll be right there." I gave the boathouse a very wide berth, making it obvious I was aware. I got back safely, locked the door, and climbed into my bunk, telling myself it was probably nothing. Maybe a drunk camper. I pushed it out of my mind. About a year later, I was with that same friend, reminiscing about the trip, and I mentioned that weird night at the lake, laughing it off. But he got quiet. Then he told me something I never knew. A few months after our trip, his little sister mentioned that the same night I came back from the lake, she'd woken up for water and saw a man standing outside the RV, just staring in. The moment he realized he was seen, he ran. We sat in silence, realizing how close things might have been. Whoever was hiding by that boathouse might have followed me back. I don't know what he wanted, and I don't care to. I'm just profoundly grateful I trusted that nagging feeling and didn't walk back quietly. A couple summers ago, my partner and I were returning from a weekend of camping in the remote woods of Washington state. We were on a long, rugged logging road, maybe an hour from the nearest paved highway. We knew the area well. Usually, the only folks out there are other campers or forestry workers. It was a beautiful day. Sunny, clear, perfect. We were just driving along when a man stepped out of the tree line ahead, flagging us down urgently. That was immediately strange because there were no other vehicles around. We slowed to a stop, and my partner rolled down his window. The man looked disheveled. He wore a heavy jacket, which was odd for the warm weather, along with dirty cargo pants and scuffed boots. He had messy hair, thick glasses, and a pale, thin face. He looked like he'd been wandering for days. He said his car battery was dead and asked for a jump start. It sounded plausible, but his delivery was slow, deliberate, almost rehearsed. Put us both on edge. Still, we try to be good people, especially out there. We agreed. He said his car was just a little way down an overgrown sidetrack. He walked ahead, and we followed in our truck, joking nervously that this was a classic horror movie setup. But underneath, we were tense. After about 200 yards down this narrow, brush-choked path, we emerged into a small clearing we'd never have found on our own. There sat a faded, boxy sedan, looking utterly out of place, its trunk open with a tarp loosely thrown over the contents. The hood was already up. My partner got out with the jumper cables while I subtly moved into the driver's seat, just in case. I scanned for anything I could use defensively. The man made forced, awkward small talk, claiming a friend had been with him but left earlier, which seemed unlikely. He just stood there watching my partner work. Eventually, my partner had to tell him to get in and try the ignition. It started. The man got out, thanked us, but his tone was strangely intense. My partner didn't even coil the cables properly. He just got in, and as soon as his door shut, I reversed us out of there fast, branches scraping the sides. When we reached the main road, I finally breathed. My partner then said the guy had just stood there, silently watching us until we were out of sight. Sure, he might have just been an odd guy with a dead battery, but we saw no fishing gear, no explanation for why he was there. That pit in my stomach feeling returns whenever I think about how isolated we were. I believe the only reason we were safe is because we stayed alert and didn't let our guard down. Sometimes your intuition is the only weapon you need. During the height of the pandemic in 2020, my friend, let's call him Alex, and I were driving from Chicago to Ohio for some construction work on a couple of properties we were renovating. We'd loaded his work van, a sturdy Chevy, and decided to drive overnight to avoid any potential traffic and arrive by sunrise. We were driving through Indiana, on those winding rural highways that seem to go on forever. Sharp curves, narrow lanes, deep ditches on either side. I was driving while Alex slept. Around 2 a.m., I pulled into a rest stop to refuel and get coffee. There weren't many people around, just one other vehicle. A dark-colored Jeep a few pumps over. I didn't pay it much mind. About 40 minutes later, I'm back on the highway, cruising in the left lane, when I notice headlights coming up fast behind us. First, it was normal. But soon, I realized it was the same Jeep from the rest stop, and that felt off. To test my suspicion, I slowed down to the speed limit. The Jeep slowed with me. That's when I woke Alex. He's ex-military, and his instincts snapped on immediately. "Yeah, I saw that guy at the stop," he said. "He watched you a little too closely." Alex told me to change lanes. I did. The Jeep mirrored us. "Okay, pull over onto the shoulder," Alex said. I did. The Jeep stopped behind us. "This guy is hunting," Alex said. He told me to go now. As I accelerated, he was digging behind the seats, pulling out a tire iron and a heavy wrench. Alex had a wild idea to brake-check the guy, force a crash, and then confront him. But since the driver hadn't made a move yet, I wasn't ready for that. Instead, Alex grabbed a high-powered work light, rolled down the back window, and shone it directly at the Jeep's windshield. The front windows were tinted too dark to see through. I swerved, and Alex hit the side window with the light. For a split second, we saw the driver. It was enough to freeze me. He was tall, slumped over the wheel, with a pale, sunken face and a wild mess of hair. His expression was one of pure, unnerving focus. But the moment he realized we were both looking right at him, that we were armed and alert, he suddenly swerved off at the next exit and vanished. Alex and I still debate what he wanted. He thinks the guy was a predator looking for a victim. I don't know his exact plan, but I'm certain it was nothing good. I'm just thankful we didn't wait around to find out. Several years back, 2 of my buddies and I decided to take a budget bus trip from Detroit to Nashville, stopping in a few cities along the way. We were broke, so the plan was simple. Ride the bus, stay in cheap motels, see the sights, then move on. It sounded like a great adventure, and it was until we reached St. Louis. That's where the trip turned from a fun excursion into a waking nightmare. We arrived around 1 a.m., and after checking our phones, we saw our motel was only a few blocks from the station. In our naivete, we thought we'd just walk and save money. Terrible decision. A taxi driver at the entrance offered us a ride, but something felt off about him, so we said no and started walking. 3 obvious outsiders dragging luggage through a rundown part of the city. We were targets. Within a minute, a woman who seemed high started following us, talking rapidly, asking for money, offering services. We tried to ignore her and walked faster, but the situation deteriorated. Then we noticed 3 men in hoodies trailing us, not speaking, just matching our pace. We stopped to tie a shoe. They stopped. That was the moment I knew we were being stalked. Just as it was escalating, the woman came back, more aggressive. Thankfully, a huge bouncer from a nearby bar saw what was happening and shouted at her to get lost. Another man started arguing with the bouncer, creating a loud distraction. In the chaos, a security guard from the bus station saw us and rushed over. He asked us what on earth we were thinking walking here at night. He pointed out we were wearing neon signs saying, "Rob us." He was right. He walked us back to the station and insisted we take a cab. The only cab there was the same one we turned down, and the guard told him to take us. The second we got in, the dread returned. He took a strange route, accelerated hard, and started muttering to himself, having a full, angry conversation with no one. We noticed he hit the door locks. We told him several times the motel was the other way, but he ignored us. When he finally pulled up to the motel, he stopped and stared ahead, breathing heavily. Then, in a calm, cold voice, he asked, "Why didn't you get in my car the first time? Was there a problem with me?" He was clearly angry we'd rejected him initially. We stammered an excuse about thinking it was a short walk. We paid the fare, tipped him well to avoid conflict, and practically fell out of the car. Before we got inside, I looked back. He was standing outside his car, just staring at us with pure contempt. Inside, the motel was no better. We barricaded the door and barely slept. We found a new place first thing in the morning and made a pact. No more bus stations in unfamiliar cities at night. Ever. In early 2017, I was 24 and living in a quiet part of southern Arizona. That weekend, I'd driven solo to Las Vegas, Nevada to visit a cousin. It's a long haul, but I'd done it many times. The desert drive was usually peaceful. The return trip was smooth until I stopped for gas in a town called Kingman. That's the last proper town before a 70-mile stretch of pure emptiness. Just sand, rocks, and the occasional dirt road. Dusk was falling as I left the station. Almost immediately, I noticed an older, white sedan pull out behind me onto the highway. I didn't think much of it at first, but soon I realized they were tailgating me. I thought they might be in a hurry and would pass, but they didn't. I sped up. They matched me. I slowed down. They slowed down. It was unervingly precise. I wondered if it was an unmarked police car, so I decided to test it. I pulled off at a small roadside diner in a tiny community, thinking if it's law enforcement, they'd stop me now. The car pulled over and parked behind me, but no one got out. I sat perfectly still, heart pounding. After several minutes of nothing, I pulled back onto the highway. They followed immediately, staying right on my bumper. I had about 45 minutes left to go, and the landscape was getting darker and more desolate. By the time I crossed into Arizona, any hope this was a coincidence was gone. My intuition was screaming. The worst part? My phone was an older model with no service out there. I was in an area locals whispered about. Weird lights, strange occurrences, and I was being followed through it with no way to call for help. I was so rattled I missed my usual turn onto the long gravel road home. I remembered a small scenic overlook up ahead that usually had a couple of cars. I pulled in, hoping they'd drive past. Of course, they pulled in right behind me. Now I was scared and angry. I decided to confront the driver and demand an explanation. When the window rolled down, I was stunned. It was a middle-aged woman with a perfectly ordinary appearance. I asked her why she'd been following me for 70 miles. She gave me a bizarre story about thinking I was her son. I stared at her in disbelief. My car had out-of-state plates, was covered in distinctive stickers, and looked nothing like her son's car, presumably. Wouldn't you call your son? Nothing added up, and her calm demeanor made it creepier. I told her off and drove away, thinking that was it. But when I turned onto my gravel road, she turned in too. I slammed on the brakes, got out, and yelled that this was a private road. It was dangerous, and she needed to leave. She just kept apologizing softly. But when I got back in and drove, she followed again. I was almost home, praying my roommate was there. As I pulled into the driveway, she pulled in too, parked and got out, starting to walk toward me, asking if she could stay the night because she was too tired to drive. I started screaming at her to get away, and just then, my roommate came out onto the porch. The second she saw him, she stopped, turned around, and literally ran back to her car, speeding away. We never saw her again. I have no idea what her real motive was. I just know she followed me for 70 miles through isolated desert, lied to my face, and only fled when another man appeared. Whatever she was planning, it wasn't good. Before we finish, if these stories made you check your locks, do us a favor and hit that like button. It really helps the channel Winds of Thought grow. And subscribe for more tales that will make you second-guess your next road trip.